Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever met someone who seemed completely uninterested in you? Distant, hard to read, almost cold. But deep down, you could sense there was something more. You noticed the way his eyes lingered a little longer, the way he quietly remembered the small details, the way his energy shifted when you entered the room. And yet, he says nothing. Why? Why would someone who loves in silence act as if they don't care? The truth is, sometimes the people who feel the deepest are the ones who speak the least. He might fear rejection so much that silence feels safer than vulnerability. He may have scars from past heartbreaks, and his heart has learned to build walls instead of bridges. Or maybe he's caught in the battle between pride and vulnerability, wanting to appear strong while secretly aching to be understood. But here's the thing, love is not always loud. Sometimes it's in the consistency, the small acts, the unspoken loyalty. And if you're wondering whether his silence means disinterest, it doesn't always. Often it means he cares more than he knows how to admit. The question then becomes, what do you do? Do you wait endlessly for unspoken love to turn into action? Or do you create the space where vulnerability feels safe? Because the truth is, love is never meant to be silent forever. At some point, it must be spoken, lived, and acted upon. Silent love versus active pursuit is one of the most fascinating contradictions in relationships. On one hand, we are taught that if someone truly cares, they will show it. They will call, they will make time, they will put in the effort to pursue. That's the traditional idea of love in action. But then there's another reality we encounter far too often: the person who feels deeply, sometimes more deeply than anyone else, and yet expresses almost nothing. Their love is quiet, tucked away in the small things, hidden beneath a mask of indifference. This creates confusion because our natural instinct is to believe that lack of expression equals lack of feeling. And yet, in some cases, the opposite is true. When someone loves in silence, it's rarely because they don't care. More often, it's because their emotions overwhelm them to the point of paralysis. They hold back, not because the love is absent, but because the love is so intense that they don't know how to channel it without risking rejection or embarrassment. Active pursuit, by contrast, is the language of confidence. It's when a person feels safe enough to take emotional risks, to be vulnerable, to chase what they want without hesitation. Silent love, though, is the language of fear and self-protection. It's what happens when love exists, but courage struggles to keep up. Think of it like this: active pursuit is the sun, bright, obvious, impossible to ignore. Silent love is the moon, still powerful, still present, but often hidden in the shadows, only revealing glimpses of itself when the timing feels safe. A man who loves you silently may never confess it outright, but you'll notice it in the subtleties. He remembers things you didn't realize you even mentioned. He notices when you're tired, when your mood shifts, when you need comfort, and he quietly positions himself to ease your burden without making a show of it. He won't text you paragraphs of affection, but he'll be the first to step in when something goes wrong. His heart is invested, even if his words don't reveal it. The danger in this dynamic is that silent love can so easily be misread as indifference. If someone never actively pursues you, you might assume you're not valuable to them, when in fact you are so valuable that the idea of losing you paralyzes them. This is where the confusion lies. In modern dating culture, pursuit is taken as the ultimate sign of desire. If he isn't pursuing, we tell ourselves he must not care. But the reality is more nuanced. Sometimes silent love is the product of personality, introverted, observant, reserved. Sometimes it's shaped by past experiences, pain, rejection, betrayal, that taught him it's safer to stay quiet than to risk another wound. And sometimes it's simply a lack of knowing how to express affection in a way that feels strong rather than weak. It's important to recognize that love expressed in silence is still love, but it doesn't carry the same clarity or reassurance as active pursuit. One leaves you guessing, wondering, doubting. The other leaves you secure and certain. That distinction is critical. Silent love may be real, but if it never grows into action, it risks being wasted. Because love, when locked inside, does not build intimacy. Intimacy requires expression, words, action, a willingness to be seen and known. Without those, the love may exist, but it cannot thrive. Understanding the difference between silent love and active pursuit also helps you see your own role more clearly. If someone is holding back out of fear, you can choose whether you want to create a space where they feel safer to open up. But you can also recognize that it is not your job to drag love out of someone who refuses to express it. Silent love may be noble, but it's not always enough. Active pursuit is what gives love the opportunity to grow into a relationship that can sustain itself. What makes this keynote powerful is realizing that a lack of obvious pursuit doesn't automatically mean a lack of love. It might mean the opposite. But also, silent love without movement can leave two people standing still. And unless silence evolves into action, it remains a love story that lives only inside one person's heart, never fully shared. Fear of rejection is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, especially in the realm of love and relationships. It sits quietly in the background of so many interactions, dictating what someone says, what they hold back, and even how they carry themselves around the person they care about. When we think of rejection, we often picture it as a single moment, a confession turned down, an unanswered text, a one-sided declaration of feelings. But in reality, rejection is much deeper than that. For many people, it represents not just the possibility of being turned away, but the possibility of being judged, of being told that they're not enough, of having their vulnerabilities exposed and dismissed. For someone who loves in silence, fear of rejection can be absolutely paralyzing. Imagine what it feels like to hold deep affection for another person and to constantly wrestle with the thought, what if I tell them and they don't feel the same? That question alone is enough to stop someone in their tracks, because to confess is to gamble, and the stakes feel unbearably high. If they say yes, it's everything you've dreamed of. If they say no, it's not just the loss of a potential relationship. It's the humiliation of having revealed your heart, only to have it met with indifference or discomfort. For some, that risk feels worse than the pain of remaining silent. Fear of rejection doesn't always come from the person in front of them. Often it comes from the past. Maybe they once opened up, only to be laughed at, ignored, or betrayed. Maybe they've carried wounds from childhood where they learned that affection was not always reciprocated. Those experiences leave scars, and the memory of past rejection conditions the mind to anticipate future rejection, even when it's not actually present. So they decide it's safer to stay in the shadows, to admire from a distance, to love quietly without ever making their feelings known. There's also the matter of pride. Many people, especially men, are raised to believe that rejection is not just a simple no. It's a blow to their masculinity, their worth, their identity. To put yourself on the line and be denied can feel like the ultimate failure. That's why some will go to great lengths to appear uninterested, to disguise their emotions, to avoid situations where they might be exposed. On the surface, they seem calm and detached. Underneath, they're battling a storm of emotions, all of which come back to one central fear. If I show my cards and lose, I won't be able to handle it. The irony is that fear of rejection often prevents people from getting what they actually want. The very silence that protects them also robs them of the chance to experience the joy of reciprocated love. By not risking a no, they also deny themselves the possibility of a yes. And this is the cruel trick fear plays. It convinces someone that safety is better than vulnerability, even though vulnerability is the only path to connection. If you pay attention, you'll notice how fear of rejection manifests itself in subtle behaviors. He hesitates before calling you, then decides against it. He drafts a message but never sends it. He lingers nearby but never initiates. He might even act detached or disinterested, not because he doesn't feel, but because showing interest feels like setting himself up for failure. That mask of indifference becomes his shield. If you reject him while he's wearing it, at least he can tell himself it wasn't the real him that got rejected. It was just the version he allowed you to see. This way, his heart remains hidden, safe from harm, but also safe from love. The tragedy of fear of rejection is that it creates distance where there could be closeness. It stops words that could have been spoken, prevents moments that could have been shared, and kills possibilities before they even have the chance to exist. Love requires risk, and rejection is always part of that risk. But for the person trapped by fear, rejection is imagined as something far more catastrophic than it actually is. They don't see it as a step toward the right connection, they see it as proof of their unworthiness. And so they stay silent, convincing themselves that silence is safer, even as their heart longs for more. Past wounds and guarded hearts play a massive role in why someone may act uninterested, even while carrying deep feelings. Human beings are not blank slates. Everyone walks into new connections carrying the echoes of their past. When someone has been hurt, whether through betrayal, abandonment, neglect, or unreciprocated love, that hurt doesn't simply vanish with time. It becomes a filter through which they view new relationships. What looks like disinterest on the surface is often self-protection, a shield carefully built to avoid repeating pain they once swore they'd never feel again. Consider how heartbreak imprints itself on the mind. A person who once gave their whole heart and was left shattered may silently promise themselves never to be that vulnerable again. They might say, "I'll care, but I won't show it. I'll feel, but I'll keep it locked inside." This internal vow hardens into habit, and over time, even when they genuinely want to open up, their defenses instinctively rise. Love feels like both a longing and a threat. They desire closeness but associate it with loss. They crave intimacy but prepare for disappointment. That tension makes them cautious, even cold. For many, guardedness is not about lack of emotion. It's about too much emotion. They know how overwhelming it feels to be hurt, so they would rather express than risk exposing themselves. They might love you silently, noticing your every word and cherishing your presence. But when it comes time to admit it, their walls stop them. They fear that if they open the door even slightly, the flood of vulnerability will pour out uncontrollably, leaving them powerless and exposed. In their mind, keeping feelings hidden feels like control, while revealing them feels like surrender. These defenses can be traced back not just to romantic relationships, but also to earlier life experiences. A child who grew up with inconsistent love, parents who weren't emotionally available, affection given and then withdrawn, often learns that love is unreliable. As adults, they carry the belief that love must be handled with caution. They might want it desperately, but doubt its stability. Every potential rejection or sign of disinterest reactivates those old wounds, making silence feel like safety. What's important to understand is that guarded hearts often communicate in subtle, indirect ways. They won't shout their love, but they'll show it through loyalty, through quiet acts of service, through being there when it counts. They may avoid the vulnerability of direct pursuit, but they will protect you, support you, and sometimes sacrifice for you in ways that only someone who truly cares would. The difficulty is that these signals are often so understated they can be missed or misinterpreted as friendship or mere kindness. The paradox of a guarded heart is that while it longs for love, it also resists it. Imagine someone reaching out to hold your hand, but pulling back at the last second because the memory of past rejection whispers, "Don't risk it." That hesitation is not a lack of desire, it's the shadow of old pain casting doubt on new possibilities. They want closeness but believe it comes with inevitable suffering. So they armor themselves, even if the armor also keeps out the warmth they crave. This is why people who love silently can seem so confusing. They'll act indifferent at times, but then their actions betray something deeper. They may pull away when things start to feel too real, not because they don't care, but because caring reminds them of past loss. It's not uncommon for someone with a guarded heart to sabotage their own chances at happiness, pushing away the very person they want, simply to avoid facing the possibility of being hurt again. The past, if unresolved, becomes a silent puppeteer. Every unhealed wound tells them, "Don't trust too easily. Don't give too much. Don't believe too fast. This inner dialogue keeps them stuck in silence, torn between the desire to love freely and the compulsion to protect themselves. Until those wounds are faced and healed, silence feels safer than expression, and distance feels safer than closeness. The result is a kind of half-love, deeply felt, but never fully lived. Masculine pride and vulnerability often clash in ways that make love look far colder than it really is. From an early age, many men are conditioned to believe that strength means control, independence, and emotional restraint. They're taught to hold their heads high, to never show weakness, to solve problems rather than confess fears. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is framed as fragile, as something that could strip them of respect. Yet love, by its very nature, requires vulnerability. It asks someone to step forward without guarantees, to risk rejection, to admit that another person has power over their emotions. For a man who prides himself on strength, that risk feels like surrender, and surrender feels unbearable. When a man acts uninterested while secretly caring, what you're often witnessing is this battle between pride and vulnerability. He wants to protect his image, the image of being self-sufficient, unshaken, untouchable. To admit feelings, especially unreciprocated ones, threatens that image. Imagine how exposed it feels to say, "I want you, and you have the power to hurt me." For someone whose identity is built around appearing in control, that admission is terrifying. And so instead of pursuit, you get withdrawal. Instead of expression, you get silence. It's not because the feelings aren't real, it's because admitting them feels like admitting weakness. This is especially true in cultures or environments where men are rewarded for confidence, decisiveness, and dominance, but rarely rewarded for honesty about their insecurities. Vulnerability in love doesn't come with applause, it comes with risk, and risk feels like a threat to masculine pride. So he acts cool, detached, even dismissive, all while internally wrestling with emotions he doesn't want to expose. Pride says, "Don't let her know how much she matters." Vulnerability says, "Tell her before it's too late." That tension creates the quiet, contradictory behavior of someone who loves but hides. You'll often see this conflict play out in small ways. He notices you're upset but hesitates to ask why, fearing the conversation will draw him into feelings he doesn't know how to handle. He wants to compliment you but holds back because expressing admiration feels like handing you power. He wants to spend time with you but disguises it as coincidence, showing up where you are instead of inviting you directly. Each choice leans toward pride. Each silence is a shield against vulnerability. But if you look closely, the cracks show. His eyes give away more than his words. His actions betray more than his posture. Pride hides what the heart is aching to reveal. The irony is that true strength isn't found in hiding emotions, but in expressing them. Yet that truth is difficult to accept for someone raised to equate vulnerability with weakness. To tell you he cares is to risk being laughed at, rejected, or pitied. To remain silent allows him to preserve his pride, even if it costs him connection. And so he continues the act of disinterest, hoping you'll never see the silent war he's fighting inside. This struggle between pride and vulnerability doesn't mean he loves less. It often means he loves more deeply than he knows how to manage. The stronger the feelings, the more threatening they feel to his sense of control. If you barely matter to him, there's nothing at stake he can pursue without fear. But if you matter immensely, every word, every move carries weight. That's when silence becomes his armor. The irony is that the very intensity of his love is what makes him act uninterested. Understanding this conflict sheds light on why some men can be consistent in every other area of life, driven, ambitious, even fearless professionally, but hesitant or guarded in love. It's not a lack of courage overall. It's the one arena where courage requires them to do what feels most unnatural, to lay down pride, to risk rejection, to step into vulnerability. Until that battle is resolved within him, love remains a quiet secret, fiercely protected but rarely spoken aloud. Signs of hidden affection are often subtle, almost invisible if you're only looking for the obvious gestures of love. When someone is too afraid, too guarded, or too proud to openly admit what they feel, their emotions tend to slip through in the smallest ways. These are not grand declarations or bold confessions. Instead, they are the quiet signals, the small choices, the unconscious behaviors that reveal more than words ever could. Understanding these signs requires attentiveness, because a person who loves in silence rarely intends for these moments to expose their heart. Yet, if you watch closely, their affection begins to reveal itself. One of the strongest indicators of hidden love is attention to detail. A man who acts uninterested but secretly cares will remember the things you didn't even realize you mentioned. He recalls your favorite drink, the book you once said you wanted to read, the way you take your coffee. He notices changes in your tone, in your mood, in the way you present yourself. His mind latches onto these details because you matter more than he's willing to admit. And though he may never verbalize it,